Hello, welcome to Gardener's World and welcome back to Longmeadow after really what's been quite a long break. Now, like everybody else, we've had to cope with extreme drought, although it did rain last night, and the garden has certainly changed. Come on. Now, the cottage garden is noticeably devoid of colour. That's partly because the roses are over. They were great, but they went over fairly quickly. And what was meant to follow them up were dahlias. We planted dahlias all over the cottage garden and they've done really badly. We've hardly got any dahlias flowering in the borders at all. So that hasn't been good. Now the jewel garden is doing fine actually. It's a bit less substantial than it normally is because we haven't watered, of course, and there's just not the same growth. And dahlias are only flowering in pots because, of course, we've watered those. And a lot of plants are still flowering, just slightly less exuberantly than they often have done. But given that this is one of the driest years in living memory, I'm really quite pleased with the way it's performed. Now, if the jewel garden has coped with this summer, the grass borders have come through with flying colours. They haven't minded the 40-degree temperature or the weeks and weeks of drought. And they have looked completely happy. In fact, I would say they're as good as they have ever been. That's a real lesson when we're planning our gardens for the future. Now, coming up on today's programme, Carol explores a garden in Shropshire where the flowers are given licence to roam.
For all the world, it's just like being dropped into the middle of this giant flowering meadow. It's magical.
We visit a London allotment where the skyline is familiar, but the vegetables, not so much.
The big spotty one, that's spaghetti squash. The winter melon we tend to put in soup. And the bitter melon we stir fry or we stuff it with meat.
JJ discovers that for one man, buying a wood opened up a whole world of possibilities, both for him and his community.
It was a two-way process,
Really?
Regenerating the forest, but very much regenerating myself as well.
And I shall be making a start on planting up spring bulbs in pots, as well as sowing some spinach for winter. Like everybody else across the nation, I feel a mixture of sorrow at the death of our Queen and deep gratitude for her life. I met her at Chelsea this year and we talked about the benefits of gardening for physical and mental health. And certainly gardens can be a solace at times like this, but also, I think more importantly, they connect us to those rhythms of nature that celebrate life and hope. The poor old spring garden has really taken the brunt of this summer's weather. Take the witch hazel, for example. That normally has some of the best autumn colour from its foliage, oranges and reds. Now those leaves are totally shriveled up. They look as though they've been hit by a blowtorch. But one plant has come through this magnificently, and that is this little clump of epimediums. These have looked good all summer long. This has coped with shade, it's coped with drought, it's had these two lime trees and the big hazel sucking the moisture out of the soil, and yet it has still done well. So I know that this is a banker. This is a plant that I can spread around the garden, planting around the base of trees, around the base of shrubs and hedges. But they give good ground cover, lovely, delicate little flowers that are at their best in March and April, and a good woodland plant. Traditionally, the best time for dividing perennials is spring, but dry springs, dry summers mean that I think it is better to do this job now and over the next month or so when the soil is still warm and there's some dampness. And if I dig that out, You can see how dry the soil is underground, but that can be divided up. Now what I can do is take maybe 3 or 4 more chunks, spread them out with the intention of creating more of a drift running around and under the tree that will leave some greenness into summer. So dig that out. This can go in like that. There's another thing I can do with these, which is to divide it up. This is actually comprised of a number of different plants. And you can see, for example, if I just take this off the end here and I pull it away, I've got in here 2 possible plants. If I pot these up into a normal peat-free potting compost, cut the tops off, water them, put them to one side over winter. They don't need to be in a greenhouse. These are very hardy. And then they'll be ready to plant out next spring as healthy young plants. Now, it's time to join Carol, and she pays a visit to a walled garden in Shropshire, which was allowed to fall into disrepair, but has been given a new lease of life.
Sat within 2 acres of gently sloping land, surrounded by beautiful red brick walls, here at Wild Goose Nursery is a young garden that's already blossomed into something very special. I'm getting that really tingly feeling. A brand new garden, never been here before. And already I can feel the excitement. I just know it's going to be a thrilling day. Abandoned for decades, this late Georgian kitchen garden was rescued and brought back to life in 2015. But rather than recreate the past, the owners have gone for something completely contemporary, full of enticing glimpses and plants which seem to be reaching for the sky. For all the world, it's just like being dropped into the middle of this giant flowering meadow. It's magical. It may look effortless, but clearly there's real plantsmanship at work here, with self-seeding annuals and perennials combining to wonderful effect. This is a garden with a very distinctive, a very definite ethos. That's not at all to say that it's all carved in stone. It's all according to rules. But what happens here is that plants are chosen because they're going to love living here. They're going to be allowed to be themselves, get on with it, and live happily together. In complete contrast to other parts of the garden where there are winding, wending paths making their way this way and that, here you've got great formality, a straight path down the centre of 2 matching borders. These beds are absolutely packed full of perennials, yes, but all perennials that are just doing their own thing. There are quite formal plants like this Cynthia trichon. This is prairie purple. It will have little flowers later on too. But this makes a kind of counterpoint right the way down and leads your eye through these borders. But then there's huge informality too, with plants like this Achillea tarmica, the pearl, with its little white buttons. And look here, where a grass has introduced itself. This is Melica ciliata, with these soft, fluffy heads. And its white is quite different from that of the Achillea. It's a bit like a soap powder advert. And another very exciting white flower, probably my favourite umbel, Selenum wallicianum. Great ferny rosettes of leaves from which rise these deep purple stems, and then plateaus of creamy white flowers, enormously popular with all sorts of pollinating insects. The purple stems of the Solenum are picked up here and there by another perennial. This is Verbena officinalis Bampton. It's absolutely delightful with these wiry stems and tiny little flowers. And it too has seeded here, there and everywhere. In fact, these borders look as though they're doing it themselves. And in many ways, they are. It's not only in the sultry days of summer that these borders shine. They're designed to provide colour and interest right across the year. But right now, it's these self-seeding plants which characterise this whole garden that are very much in evidence, none more so than this. This is Atriplex, Hortensis rubra, otherwise known as Orac. It's a very popular annual and it just puts itself all over the place, and yet somehow it always seems to end up in just the right place. It's a form of spinach, and earlier in the year you can eat it, but I wouldn't want to, because I want it to do its thing. These beautiful seed heads now against the brilliant blue sky, just utterly perfect. But it's not only annuals. There are loads of biennials here too. And some of the flowers are monumental. How about this for a giant? This is Pusidanum verticillari. It's an enormous umbel. I think it's so statuesque, so brilliant, and all achieved in just 2 years. And another umbel, fennel, also behaves sometimes as a biennial, although it can be perennial and keep going for a few years. But in here is a plant that's in full seed now, nestling in the midst of this jungle. It's Lunaria annua, which might lead you to think it's an annual. It's not, it's a biennial, and its usual name is Honesty. It's instantly recognisable in seed, and you could let the seed fall to the ground and make new plants, or you could collect a bit of it and then put them into the garden where you choose. But alongside the Honesty, and with just the same coloured stems as those seed heads, is this lovely plant. It's glorious. It's Petrinia monandra, and I absolutely adore it. It's got these lovely sort of lime green flowers. It looks perfectly positioned here, and yet it goes so brilliantly with so many other plants. I can't come to such an exciting garden as this and not talk about colour. And like everything else here, colour has been used in a way to create a feeling of harmony. And this border is a perfect example. Here, the sun is just gradually fading down behind the trees, so the light is much lower. It's not bright sunlight anymore. And you can see how these glowing purples and these delightful little sanguisorba with these sort of catkin-shaped flowers in the softest, dustiest pink. And look at the background, absolutely perfect, this brick wall, which just reflects this colour. But it's got nothing to do with academic colour wheels and what goes with what. It's much more intuitive than that, much more poetic. And this border is a beautiful example. This garden simply thrills the senses. And the overall feeling here is that it's the gardening philosophy that is at its creative heart. Once plants here are established, they're very much left to their own devices. The garden here is never watered. And though gardening and nature are not the same thing, this garden echoes nature. All the plants and the creatures who live in harmony with them are happy. And the same must go for anybody who's lucky enough to visit this beautiful place.
It does seem incredible looking at that it hasn't been watered at all this summer. It does show you that if you choose the right plants, give them a good start in life, they can not just survive, but really thrive under conditions that might seem extremely harsh. I'm just starting to prune back these raspberries. Now, these are summer fruiting raspberries, and I have to say that they have done really, really badly. Raspberries like to be damp. They do not like to dry out. The other thing that's happened, which I've never seen before, is that even before they were ripe, the birds just gobbled them up. They were desperate for any moisture, and they took it from apples, raspberries, currants. Everything was stripped. So if your raspberries did badly this year, don't worry, you're not alone. However, there's no reason why that should mean they'll do badly next year. And you can see that they finished fruiting, and the canes that they fruited on are these brown ones that grew last year. And in order to make sure we get good fruiting next year, I need to remove these old canes and replace them with the new. And you don't prune them anywhere except for right down at the base. So they all need to come out. So if I cut that and that, and these ones can come too. That, and that. Now, having removed those, what I'm left with is the new growth. And you can see that by and large, they're a pale green as opposed to the brown of the old canes, and also they're much more flexible. Sometimes you get a lovely purple colour to them, but again, they're fresh, they're flexible, and the important thing is this will carry next year's fruit, so we don't want to prune these off. And select the strongest and best canes, looking for about 6 or 7 canes per plant, and fan them out equidistant along your support. So I will tie those in, something like that, and that's all you have to do till next year. Now, these are my autumn fruiting raspberries. I've got Polka at this end and Autumn Bliss here. Now, the thing about autumn fruiting raspberries is that they start to produce their fruit as the summer ones finish, normally round about the beginning or the middle of August, and they will carry on fruiting sometimes as late as November. And the crucial thing is that they produce their fruit on the current season's growth. So all the new growth that's happened this year will carry all the fruit. And that makes pruning really easy, because when they finish fruiting, when the leaves have all dropped off, which will be somewhere around about Christmas, just cut the whole lot flush with the ground. Now, it's time to visit one of your gardens. And we're going to the south coast to visit the garden of Sonia Waters.
Welcome to my little Brighton garden. Because it's baking hot in this little yard in the summer, I've got tropical plants, bananas, canna lilies. Through the studio door, I'm a painter by the way, and you can see the whole of the depth of the garden leading right up to the beautiful cherry tree at the top. I like mostly green with a splash of bright pink, a splash of red, a splash of black for drama. I love the way that plants have got a life of their own and a mind of their own. So this has grown through the fronds of the Trachycarpus and is looking jolly healthy. This is my shady area. This little darling is my favourite fern. It's so delicate with its black stalks, and it can't put up with a single dapple of sunlight. This lovely little plant with its spotty stems, it's from South Africa, an Ecomis. It's supposed to like as much sun as possible, but show it a bit of sunlight and it droops. Melianthus major. I love its leaf forms and its silvery colour. Along to my succulent spot, sitting on my old treadle sewing machine. So that's the end of our trip through my very small garden. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.
You can see that Sonia's garden is composed with the eye of an artist, getting all those colours and textures and forms to work together, not always just harmonising, but sometimes energising each other. It's very, very successful. And of course, that's what we all try to do to a certain extent in the garden. And here in the Jewel Garden, I did an experiment this year with the 4 pots in the centre. And there's nothing I can criticise about these pots. I'm very happy with them in one sense. I like the combination of the grasses and the way the nautia twists and falls and the sweet potato falls over with that darkness of colour. However, it's in the wrong place. It's just not punching its weight enough. This would be really nice in the Paradise Garden, in the Cottage Garden. So they may not be repeated here, but I might use the planting scheme elsewhere. However, I have got some things right. This is a Paulownia, or the foxglove tree. And I planted it last June when it was just about that high. And if it's left unpruned, it will grow into a large tree with wonderful sort of mauve flowers. But if you prune it hard every year, it won't have any flowers, but the leaves will go extra big. And you can use that as a foil to give real drama to a border. And this March, I cut it back just to where my finger is. And all I was left with was just a bare stem. It could have been a broomstick handle sticking out the ground. So it was a bit of a gamble. However, since then, all of this has grown happily and healthily. And bear in mind, I haven't watered it once. And that's the beauty of plants like Paulownia, and you can do it with catalpa. By pruning them hard, you encourage big, dramatic foliage at the expense of flowers. Now, I suspect we all have a traditional idea of allotments, but the truth is that allotments are changing. There's a new generation of allotment holders who are trying out new ways of doing things and of growing new plants. And we went to London to visit an allotment filled with a fascinatingly diverse and unusual range of produce.
Here is really, really nice. Really beautiful. And I'm on top of the hill. This is in Dulwich as well. It's very hard to get a plot, you know, in this beautiful place. I love it, you know. It's made me feel very proud, very happy actually. I still ring up my dad and go, how do you grow this? How do you grow your watercress? I'm still learning, I'm still experimenting. Hello, my name's Helen too. This is my Asian garden. I grow all sorts of Chinese vegetable, English vegetable, all sorts. And I have the best view. And I absolutely love it up here. I think we waited over 7 years for this plot. The queue in London is so long. It's basically for my mother-in-law to, I thought maybe a way for her to exercise. We've done everything ourselves, really. My mother-in-law, she's very strong. She does a lot of the digging. I want to grow anything and everything. I copy my dad. Every time I go up to his house, I will get some idea of him, really. Because it's such a small space, so I grow everything upwards. The big spotty one, that's spaghetti squash, or shark fin melon it's called. It's the first time I managed to achieve growing so many in one go. This is sweet potato, which I've grown so it trails up. That's a chow chow. You can eat the vine, the tips where it's tender, or you wait for the fruits and you eat the fruits. This is winter melon, donggua, the Chinese people call it. The winter melon we tend to put in soup, and the bitter melon we stir fry or we stuff it with meat. Doody, or bottle gourd it's called, we just stir fry with dry shrimp. This is a cucumber melon. It's very crunchy. It's got a bit of tang to it. We got this allotment 2 years ago. Basically, it's very, very bare. It's just grass, so we have to dig it up and put raised bed in. The only problem with this area is clay soil, which is very, very hard to grow. So we have put loads and loads of compost in here. We try to grow a lot of things in containers, and that grow a lot better. This is turmeric, yellow ginger. This is sand ginger. You mix it with the salt and then use it as a rub for chicken. This is Vietnamese mint. You can use this for pickling vegetable, a salad. Papaya salad is very nice with this. Sesame leaves. You know what sesame leaves is? It's basically the herbs that you put in a summer roll, or the Japanese people, they like to eat like sashimi with it. I got Chinese celery, Japanese pumpkin, which I just harvested. We were the boat people from Vietnam. From Vietnam, we went to China, China to Hong Kong, and then Hong Kong to England. I was very young then, so for me, it's like an adventure. But for the adults, yes, it's very, very scary. When we first come, they like to grow their veg because in the UK, you cannot buy a lot of Chinese veg previously, but now you can. I don't want to throw anything away. The bitter gourd I grew over there last year, so it didn't do very well, so I moved it and I tried another way of growing it, like in a raised bed with plastic recyclable bottles over it, so it gives a bit of like a greenhouse effect. And it's doing a lot better. It's giving me fruits this year. The these are all given to me by the butcher. They use the tub for olives and they throw away, so it's, you know, good use. The water bottles, I use that instead of throwing away. The container I picked up from like pallet wood, so I picked it up and just turned it into containers. The thing I'm most proud of, my morning glory and the sweet basil is coming up really nicely. You didn't think you can grow sweet basil in the UK. I'm still learning. I still ask, see that couple down there? That they have the perfect plot, I think. You notice that everything's immaculate. I asked her how to grow tomatoes because I've never managed to grow tomatoes. Oh, you there? Oh. Wow, we look big one.
Pumpkin.
Wow.
One's still growing.
Yeah. Wow. One of my top tips is soaking banana skin in water to make fertilizer, and I use that for the gourd. It's supposed to produce abundance of fruits. You don't realise you're in London, do you know what I mean? You're up here, you're in the countryside. When the sun sets, it's just so amazing. When I come here, I'm like carefree, you know, I'm not stressed, I'm here. Literally time just go by and I enjoy it. After if you get to fruit like one bitter melon, I'm so happy. Yeah, and I've got a few gourds, yeah, I'm like over the moon.
Helen's allotment is inspirational, but if I'm really honest, I hadn't heard of some of those vegetables, let alone grown them. And actually, this year is the first time that I've grown lupus. And for the first half of this summer, I thought it was going very badly. But look, we've got a whopper. It's not ready to harvest yet. You harvest loofahs when they turn brown. So don't worry if all the leaves fall off, leave the fruit on till they turn brown, and then you can harvest them, and I'll do that with you. I've overwatered these which is why I haven't got so many fruit but got lots of growth. And the reason I've overwatered them is because I put them next to the cucumbers, which do need water and have been brilliant. We've had scores of cucumbers, there are still lots on there. I've never known them grow so well. The padron peppers have been really good. The interesting thing is to see how big they are compared to the chilies in pots. Give them good soil and nice growing environment and they will get quite big. And finally, the aubergines on this side, again, have done really well. They've loved this hot summer. You can see we've got fruit there ready to harvest. You know that they're ready when they're full size, they look like you expect them to look, and they're still glossy. Now, what I would say with aubergines is at this time of year, you're not going to get many more fruit, if any. So what you need to do is take off the tops of the plant so that where you've got young fruit, like these, for example, all the energy can go into ripening those rather than forming new fruit. So if you've got a plant like that, just take it and cut it off. And the fact that I'm removing flowers is not wasteful because they're never going to happen. Now, still to come. JJ visits a wood with the power to heal a whole community.
This place isn't just for you. I mean, a lot of people come here, don't they?
I decided fairly early on to open it up and say to the public, you're welcome to come and walk through here. And then it just grew into all sorts of therapeutic and educational opportunities while we were doing it.
And we visit a couple whose use of exotic plants has not only transformed their garden, but also their lives.
It's certainly changed, hasn't it?
Yeah, very much so. We had very ordinary plants then, didn't we?
Yeah.
We didn't have to live with them in the winter in the house.
Didn't have to take them in the bedrooms.
No. So you wouldn't have had to climb over the end of the bed to get in those days.
But now it's time for another of your films, and this one comes from someone who has found inspirational and innovative ways to tend his garden.
My name is Ronnie. I live here in Dublin, Ireland, and I am a very keen gardener. When I'm actually planting out into the garden, I have a sort of a routine. I tip the pot like this. I've been gardening since I was a kid, and I was totally addicted to it from day one. There we go. I grow mostly vegetables and fruit. I'd like to show people with challenges, physical challenges, that there are ways that you can get to little problems. Isn't that beautiful? I'm so happy with that. Sometimes I have trouble pinching out the side shoots on my tomatoes. So here's a little idea, and it gets into small little spots. So we can go down and we can clip it out like that. This is a cotton bud on the end of a bamboo stick, and I just bent it over so it's easy to use. This is a Royal Crown squash. They don't always get fertilized because there's not a lot of bees in the polytunnel sometimes. So we take some pollen out and we drop it into the female flower like this. Sometimes when it comes to watering, it's very hard to get at plants. So you get a milk bottle. Stick it into the water, it's got some comfrey mix in it, take it out, give them a good swig. With a little bit of ingenuity, a little bit of determination, you can do it.
Now, I haven't had to do this for ages, which is to try and get in out the wet. We've been longing for rain, so it's wonderful to have rain. That's fantastic. But before we get too excited, I'm afraid it's going to take more than a cloudburst to get the garden back to the moisture levels we need. In fact, what I'm praying for is a really sodden winter. Well, it's nice to have the dry to come into. And seeing Ronnie in his polytunnel is really inspirational. And he's right. A little bit of ingenuity, a little bit of determination, and anything and everything is possible. Now, at this time of year, normally I would be planting bulbs, particularly daffodils, into the grass. And growing bulbs in long grass for spring flowering is absolutely a September job, as long as you can get them in the ground. And despite the rain, there is no way that I could get a bulb into the ground. The ground is still like iron. However, now is a really good time to plant bulbs in pots. So what I've got here are 3 different daffodils that I particularly like, and I've grown for a long time and I highly recommend. Now, in order of flowering, the first is tete-a-tete, which will start flowering in February. About 8-9 inches tall, beautiful, simple yellow flower. The second is Arctic Bells. Now, this has got a sort of rounded, almost bowl-like flower, much paler, and that will flower in March. And finally, I've got Pipit. And Pipit is another favourite of mine, and that's later. That won't start flowering till April. But all of them can be planted now at the same time. So we'll put a crock in, and then half fill the pot with compost. Now, I'm going to plant the Arctic Bells first. I always do it the same way, which is to go a ring round the outside of the pot. And when you're growing in a container, you can afford to put them really quite close together. And of course, as always, pointy side up. And then another inner circle, like this. And one in the middle. And you can see that they are not too high up, they're halfway down the pot. It is important to keep them covered. And then cover them over with another layer of compost. And finally, cover them with a layer of grit. Now that does 2 things. One, it makes it look nicer. It sets off the flowers very well. And 2, it's practical, because when it rains or you water them, you can splash the compost up and you get specks of dirt on the petals. This way, that doesn't happen. Finally, don't forget to label them. And that can be put aside. You won't see any signs of life until the new year or even February. Don't let them dry out completely. I water these maybe once a month, but don't let them get too wet. And they can be stored in the dark quite happily until the new year, and then bring them out so they get some light. Now, we're going to Lincolnshire to visit the garden of Jenny and Roger Grasham, which is dramatic and exuberant.
It just takes you into another world, coming out here. Anything that's bothering you, it relaxes you straight away. It just drains away.
If there's something we're growing, and we've been growing it for years, and it flowers for the first time, it does lift you.
Yeah, there's excitement from it as well as calm, yeah. I'd like to welcome you to our little bit of paradise. This is the secret garden of Laos. When we first moved in, it was just grass all the way down to the shed. The garden's, what,
85 metres long.
13 wide. It was our youngest son, Stuart, complained about the bluebells getting mowed down because he was mowing down, going up and down like a tank with a lawnmower, so bluebells went as well by the hedge. So I promised I'd dig some out and put them in a little patch. He was happy with that. I just kept digging after that. I just thought, that looks nice.
It's certainly changed, hasn't it?
Yeah, very much so. We had very ordinary plants then, didn't we?
Yeah.
We didn't have to live with them in the winter in the house.
Didn't have to take them in the bedrooms.
No. So you wouldn't have had to climb over the end of the bed to get in those days.
Yeah. You got into the exotics after 2010.
And you just evolved and came along with it, didn't you?
Yes.
My go-to saying was go large, in leaves and in size of plants. It just gives me the atmosphere that I want out here. This is our tropical island, as I call it. Been here a lot of years. This goes right the way round, and you can get all the way around it, so it's different from all views. I think at the last count we had 16 different varieties of bananas at various places in the garden, and some are still quite small and others quite enormous. The bananas are in this spot. We've got the big paddle-leaved Ensete morellii, and then next to that is another Ensete, but a different variety called Montbéliardii. Goes more upright instead of spreading. And behind that, there's a green one that stays out all the time, Sycamensis. It can be tricky putting these little splashes of colour in shady areas. And years ago, I used to hate the begonias, the bedding things. I used to think, oh, ghastly things, because I think I'd always seen them just a mash of colours smashed together. But now I find they're invaluable. So when you've created shade and you want to put a little splash of colour, they light up an area. A begonia will flower its socks off in a shady area, so it's just brilliant. And the ricinus, we've got various different varieties of those around the garden, and we have one behind me here, blue giants. They grow so much in a season, so even when you're just starting, there's something that you can grow to start you off with these big leaves until you can acquire and get to know about so many other things as you progress in your exotic gardening journey.
I do like...
You like propagating,
yeah,
don't you?
Yeah, it was all trial and error, wasn't it? Growing things from seed, taking cuttings and things like that. It always seems to have given a good results.
We grow Tithonia torch every year from seed. I just couldn't manage without them on this border now, really. They're a little bit tricky when you're first getting to bring them outside. They don't like being cold, and they certainly don't like being too wet. But if you get it right, you get this fantastic, rich orange daisy-like flower. This is what we call our hotbed. So it's reds and oranges and yellows, mostly.
Oh, the dahlias are looking well this year.
This is one of your favourites, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It's
Karma Bonbini.
Bonbini, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's quite zingy when it first comes out, but it gets a bit more pastel-y in the bright sunshine.
Deborah Rennie.
Deborah Rennie.
Oh,
a very
brilliant.
good red. We love that one. Canna Cleopatra, a favourite of ours. And,
It is, it's a cracker,
and
that
visitors always notice it as well.
It's the one they talk about the most.
It's weird, but it's beautiful.
We fetch a load of horse manure in the car, which not everybody idea of fun, but and then we just maybe once every year or once every 2 years we cover the whole bed with horse manure. It is one of our best beds.
People say, oh, you know, how have you achieved it? And I say, well, you've just got to start with something. It doesn't all happen at once, but start and enjoy the journey.
I mean, I'm a person that does not sit, and I have never sat in this garden for this long before, have I? Which I've enjoyed, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's looking well.
I can certainly identify with not sitting in the garden. It's almost impossible. There's always something to do. But I'm not quite so sure that I would tolerate having my bedroom so full of plants that I have to climb into bed over the end. But each to their own, and it clearly works for Jenny and Roger because they have made a wonderful garden. Now, here in the vegetable garden at Longmeadow, things have moved on since you were last here. We've entered another season, really. The French beans that I sowed about 5-6 weeks ago have grown well, and you can see there are some tiny beans just beginning. Those will be ready to harvest in a week or so. Also, our courgettes have been good. Now, I have watered these once or twice a week, and we have been harvesting them regularly. It's a variety called Tromboncino. And they're called that because they make this curious trumpet shape. But it's absolutely delicious, so definitely recommended. We've been harvesting this for months. Also, it grows slower, so therefore you have a longer window to harvest, because we've all been in that situation where you have a glut of enormous marrow-like courgettes and you don't know what to do with them. Let's put those there for the moment. What I'm really here for is to sow some seed, because this bed had carrots in it. Harvested those. I've added quite a lot of compost to the bed. And I'm going to sow some spinach. Now, I have to say that if you too want to sow spinach, do it now. We're running very close to the end of the window when it's viable, but we'll be harvesting this round about early November. And because I'm sowing a winter spinach, they will last through winter. Using a board to get my spacing, and I'll just draw a drill like that with the edge of my hand. They're quite big seeds, and these are fairly large plants, so that you can space them out up to 6 inches apart. Now, I will just cover the seeds over. I don't need to water them in because we had that downpour. If it doesn't rain for a week, I will water them, and I will make sure they stay moist until they start to appear. But once it's growing, there's not much you need to do other than to weed. But with any luck, we'll start picking them in November and be able to continue harvesting them right through till next spring. But now we're heading to the Yorkshire Dales, where JJ visited a wood that has become hugely important to the lives of local people.
We all know that spending time outdoors is good for our physical and mental well-being. But for me, there is something special about being surrounded by trees in the dappled light of a beautiful woodland.
I've come to Fish Pond Wood, near Harrogate, to meet a doctor who's not only passionate about trees and woodlands, but who has put that passion to work for the good of his local community. Almost 10 years ago, Dr. Peter Brambleby bought 25 acres of this glorious ancient woodland.
This place is magical. But tell me, why did you buy a forest?
I think I needed a project to do in retirement, and the idea of regenerating a lovely old piece of semi-natural ancient woodland really appealed. And it was a two-way process.
Really?
Regenerating the forest, but very much regenerating myself as well. So it's been a partnership, I'd say.
But this place isn't just for you. I mean, a lot of people come here, don't they?
I decided fairly early on to open it up and say to the public, you're welcome to come and walk through here. And then it just grew into all sorts of therapeutic and educational opportunities while we were doing it. Some people come overtly because they're recovering from an illness and they want to get better. And a lot of people come just because it's a lovely place to be and to stay fit.
Medicines can cure you, but a place like this can heal you.
I think there is something genuinely magical about being in woodland. There's good research evidence that the colour green is soothing. Under trees, it's cool, it's quieter, it deadens the outside world, but it heightens your senses to the insects buzzing in the canopy, the birds twittering, the ducks on the pond, and it just brings all your senses alive. And we now call it our natural health service. I think the great thing about, and gardeners will know this, and anyone who enjoys the outdoors knows this, that you don't just grow the plants, you grow yourself.
For the local community, these woods have become a valuable resource. Birdwatcher Sheila Reinshee is a regular visitor.
It's got a bit of everything. It's got the pond, which is lovely, isn't it? The water, the trees, and the openness. It is super. It's really nice. And the birds are good. I come regularly on my own to walk because it's such a nice place.
And for Kevin Murgatroyd, a member of the local woodworking group, Men in Sheds, Peter's approach has been warmly appreciated.
If you've got a wonderful area like this, what is the point in just keeping it to yourself? You want to share it with people so that everybody can enjoy it and everybody can reap the benefits from it. And that is really what Peter is doing. And the more people can enjoy it, the better.
For one local artist, these woods have been vital to his creative expression and his emotional well-being. James Owen Thomas was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3 and didn't speak until he was 6 years old.
James, how has nature and this woods, how did it help you growing up?
Being on the autistic spectrum has meant that I suffer from depression, anxiety, and from a lot of different stressful situations on a daily basis. So being out in wildlife and nature and the environment has really helped with that.
And there are so many beautiful things here. What is it about trees specifically, though, that you think are special?
Just in their presence, how they tower over you and how they sort of act really as a form of shelter. It can make you feel really at peace. If there weren't trees, we would be in a really catastrophic situation. We wouldn't have the ability to live fundamentally. And because of how important that is, it's something which has really impacted my life and what I do.
Since 2021, James has been an ambassador for the Tree Council. He was a representative at the climate conference COP26 in Glasgow and has taken his environmental message to Downing Street.
It's really getting the message out there why nature is important, why looking after the environment is essential to the future, but also realising that children are the future as well. It's going to be the younger generations that are most affected by the climate crisis.
James's artworks are inspired by nature and many of the trees growing in these woods.
Wow, James, these are fantastic. They're so striking. What are they made from?
The main material that I use within all of my artwork are discarded National Lottery scratch cards. But I also use any kind of single-use item that would otherwise have gone into waste and landfill.
For James, both creating and exhibiting his art and his advocacy role at the Tree Council are all part of the wider message he wants to share.
It's getting people to realise that we cannot keep going forward in the way that we are currently at present, and it's trying to get people to understand just how important it is to look after nature and wildlife.
For Peter, following James's journey has been a clear demonstration of his philosophy that, if you look after nature, it will look after you.
James I find inspirational, and he's a lesson to all of us, really, about finding what you're good at, finding what your passions are, and he's concentrated on that, developed it to the max, and he's sharing that talent. That's the great thing.
And as well as learning from the people who come here, for Peter, there are many lessons to be learned from the trees themselves.
Trees give you a different perspective on life. You think long term, seasons change, nothing lasts. Good things don't last, like the blossom and the bright leaves, but the bad things don't last either. And I think spending a lot of time around a woodland, you sort of fall into that rhythm of the cycle of trees. I think that's a very rich metaphor for life. Yeah. That good things always do come around.
I've always felt that the best of a garden marries in with the best of woodland, and almost all woodland is good. Now, you're not going to get many strawberries in woodland, I suppose some wild ones perhaps, but about 6 weeks ago, I took some runners from the strawberries that I'm growing in this trough, and I put them into pots. Now, the reason I'm not lifting that up is because it's attached to the mother plant. And now that it's growing, it should have its own roots and won't need that attachment. So if I just cut this now like that, and then that like that, I've now got a separate strawberry plant. Now, I'm assuming that it's got roots of its own, so this is a little bit of a moment. These are the homemade staples that I pinned it down with, and yes, we've got roots, I can tell. There we go, look at that, lovely. So we've made ourselves a new strawberry plant. Now I'd intended to fill the gaps in this trough, and 6 weeks ago there were gaps to be filled, but you can see now they've filled themselves. The runners have taken naturally, they've rooted, and there's no room. However, this will grow beautifully in a pot. And of course, the advantage of that is strawberries in a pot can be grown on a roof, on a balcony, on a patio, or even on a windowsill. So if that goes there, I shall get 2 more there and there, and they will spill over the edge and look really good as well as tasting good. Right, when I finish this job, here are your jobs for the weekend. This year, brown rot, with its distinctive concentric rings of pustules, seems to be badly affecting apples and pears, and it's important to remove any that you see. Pick any that have fallen to the ground, and also take them off the tree, and not just those that are badly affected, but even if you see any sign of it at all. Then don't add them to your compost heap, but put them in your green waste, or if that's not possible, bury them. Agapanthus have finished flowering, and it's important to cut the seed heads off. And don't just snip them at the top, but follow the stem right down to the base and remove them there. And this will mean that all the goodness from this year's foliage will go down into the rhizomes to get the best of next year's flowers. Now is a good time to take pelargonium cuttings. Use a very free-draining compost, and I add plenty of perlite to mine. Choose nice, strong growth that doesn't have a flower bud, and then remove the lower leaves with a sharp knife and clean off the cutting point just below a node. Insert the cuttings into the corner of a pot or around the edges of a circular one, and then water it well. But thereafter, don't spray or mist it, but keep the leaves as dry as possible, whereas the compost should be moist, and it should root in 2 to 3 weeks' time. Well, I've got one more job to do. Now, don't disappear, we need the basket. I want to collect some sweet corn. What do you want? You want something for your... Pure bribery. There, look at that. Ooh, look how delicious that is. Right, now we can continue. It's time to harvest sweet corn. Now you know when sweet corn is ready because the tassels, the flowery bits at the end, turn dark brown or black, and they're a little bit wiry to touch. And so if you just pull it away like that, you can see that if I open it up, they're inside. Perfect, absolutely perfect. Now the whole point about growing sweet corn is the sweetness very quickly goes once you've picked it. So take them back to the kitchen, into boiling water, let them cook, and then eat immediately, slathered in butter. I'm afraid that's what we've got time for today, but I'll see you back here at Longmeadow at 8 o'clock next Friday. So until then, bye-bye.